Welcome back to the Purple Political Breakdown. How's it going? How's your day been? And today we are reacting to Hasan's conversation with Mark. By the time this comes out, I'm pretty sure the Destiny reaction is out, and it's way longer than the Hasan one. I'll be completely honest, because Hasan's one looks like it's only 50 minutes, so it's like half as long. But with that said, I am very interested to see how that goes because the Mark Destiny, they had visceral disagreements about the facts of the matter in a lot of cases and the interpretation in a lot of cases, but they had a fluent conversation and was very productive. When it comes to Mark and Hassan, I think Hassan is a terrible political commentator, not because he's dumb, but because of how he kind of conducts himself. I think he's dishonest, and I think he's kind of a bad role model in terms of political commentary. I think he causes more harm than good, to be honest. That's my personal opinion from everything that I've seen regarding Hassan. But um, opinions can change. But I'm curious to see how this conversation goes. So let's dive into it.
I have to like describe this to someone who lives in the real world and does like actually important and good work.
This is important work too, man. I'm learning there's a whole streamer world out there that I didn't know anything about.
Yeah, no, I've
Also, we're to call
I've
out.
been a massive fan of yours for a very long time. I remember you getting booted from CNN, which was very frustrating for saying from the river to the sea, Palestine would be free at the UN. But for those of you who don't know who you are, would you mind giving us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, man. I am a lifelong student activist. For the last 20 years, I've been a professor, scholar. I am a journalist as well. I think my day job, I'm a professor at CUNY University, City University of New York Graduate Center, where I get to hang out with amazing students, and I'm I do my thing over there. I'm a scholar of the Middle East, as well as race in the United States, and also carcerality. I focus a lot on mass incarceration. So, and there's some overlap and intersection there too. For the last maybe 15 years, I've been a journalist as well. I've hosted at HuffPost Live. I've hosted at BET, VH1. I was a contributor for CNN, as you mentioned, and Fox News at one point. And I continue to be one at Al Jazeera.
Yeah,
where I'm a host up front, the show up front every week.
hell yeah. You're I mean, look, you've done incredible work. You also, I did not know this until recently, you also speak Arabic as well.
Yeah. I'm an anthropologist, and my
Nice.
field work, my recent field work, has been in East Jerusalem, in the African quarter of East Jerusalem, and so I spent a lot of time, studying Afro-Palestinian communities, among others. And yeah, the language is part of the field work.
Yeah. So of course, with a serious background such as yourselves, we're going to be talking a little bit about some serious stuff, and then a whole bunch of not so serious stuff. I'm just letting you know ahead of time. So
Love that.
let's start out with the more serious stuff. Yesterday, while the Super Bowl was happening, Israel decided to around the same time decided to start bombing Rafah, which was coming up for, I guess, like a week. They had signaled that they were going to start bombing Rafah. Rafah is the southernmost point of the Gaza Strip, for those of you who do not know, and it is the area that is supposed to be like the last remaining safe space, because they originally forced the Palestinians to evacuate from northern Gaza, saying that there was going to be a military operation there, into southern Gaza. Then they started bombing different parts of southern Gaza, all the way into Rafah, which is where the Rafah border crossing is with Egypt. It is literally the southernmost point of the Gaza Strip, where currently the estimates are that there are more than 1 million Palestinian civilians remaining. And this was a particularly bloody campaign, as far as I understand, that also coincided with the Shin Bet doing a special operation to rescue 2 hostages simultaneously. And the cost of that was more than 100 Palestinians that were killed ruthlessly as a simple distraction. So
I heard 67 Palestinians were killed. That's what I researched, just so it'll be clear. But yeah, they did. Israel did rescue 2 hostages. Uh, I don't want to do this, but 2 hostages. They're both like 70-year-old, 60-year-old men. It's kind of tough. I'm gonna be honest. It's kind of tough, but you know what I'm saying.
50 of them specifically in the bombing campaign, about 100 total. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that, and where you fall on this. I mean, and update people as well on the issue.
Yeah, we're in an extraordinarily depressing dire, I wish I could say unforeseeable, but I won't say that, but a depressing and dire kind of moment. What's happening in Rafah is especially troublesome right now. You've laid out a big part of it. Israel's campaign, ultimately, if we begin from the premise that Israel's campaign has not been to wage war on Hamas, but to wage war on the Palestinian people, and to ultimately achieve the goal of depopulation, ethnic cleansing, etc., then this all tracks. It's kind of the only way this makes sense. Everything else will confuse you if you don't begin from the place of understanding that colonies going to colonize, right? And so the move from the south to the north, or from the north to the south, has not been without serious peril for Palestinians from the beginning. The whole argument was, oh, we're the most moral army in the world, we're the most principled army in the world, we give you notice, we do this, we do this. And what we have found is, in some ways, they've explicitly abandoned their strategies of things like roof knocking as a way of giving warnings. And they've said, like, look, after October 7th, we ain't warning you about anything, basically. And then there were the people.
Roof knocking in and of itself is already like a pretty ridiculous practice, but it was, in my opinion, done specifically to obviously market Israel's actions to the Western world as though they are the most moral army. And like
Right.
what you're saying is like liberal Zionism is just gone as a concept at this point, post October
Yeah.
7th.
Right. And they've used October 7th as a pretext to say, look, we tried this liberal.
Roof knocking, I think we already talked about it. It doesn't necessarily mean that they gave up giving a forewarning, but that specific strategy was abandoned.
BS. Now we're going to just go, whole hog. And for those who don't know, the idea of roof knocking is to drop a kind of drop a munition on, on a structure, a house, whatever, as a warning to say, hey, get out within X amount of time. The problem is X amount of time is not enough time. And oftentimes they don't even observe the rules that they say they're going to follow, which has been the challenge of the evacuations from the north to the central part of Gaza and from the center to the south, is that, you got 72 hours and then within a few hours, people are getting hit. Or you got 72 hours or 24 hours or whatever, take this road, and then you take that road and that road gets hit. And so the humanitarian corridors, the pathways to safety, the shelters, the hospitals, the masajid, everything that's supposed to be safe are not safe. And so against the backdrop of that, you see people now in Rafah. And so people are now in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, which again is very dense. You're talking about 25 miles long, 5 miles wide. And you got these people who are there ostensibly for shelter. And you have to understand Gaza Rafah is supposed to have maybe 250.
If this is just like a circle jerk, I may stop watching. In the sense that like there's like, oh yeah, I agree. Like at that point, let me see this. At that point, I mean, they're just gonna regurgitate the same stuff. So, but I'm curious on the flow of the conversation.
50,000 people, 200,000 people, and that's still dense. And now you're looking at over 1 million people. There are 1.2 maybe million people there, and they're there ostensibly for safety. And now, because the Israeli state has decided that this is a Hamas breeding ground, and it's littered with violence and terrorism, that now they're going to do ground invasions there. They're going to continue to strike there, and so they're now asking people to move north, 20 kilometers, about 8 miles. Except now they have nowhere to go. They have no way of getting there. Lots of children with no parents. Lots of people most people with no vehicles. 1.7 million at 2.2 with no house, no shelter. It's freezing cold at night. We could list all the things that make movement almost impossible, and then the very pathways that they're taking to safety or to ostensible safety are littered with violence. And so, and by every measurable index, any further violence, any further military invasion into Rafah will lead to a humanitarian disaster. That's according to independent bodies, human rights organizations, etc. And the Israeli government once again has said, look, we'd love not to do it. We really aren't into this whole genocide thing. However, Hamas, they're everywhere. They're leaving us with no choice. And so as a result, what's happening in Rafah is kind of the culmination of the last 4 or 5 months, which is a war not on Hamas, which by any measures would be a failure, but instead a war on the most vulnerable people of Palestinian society. And so any response we have right now, as we see another mosque destroyed, as we see hospitals being sieged, as we see more innocent people dead, is we have to demand an immediate ceasefire in order to prevent something worse from happening.
Yeah. There are people in the chat saying that like this wasn't actually a real hostage operation. The hostage operation was earlier, and that the Israeli government is simply claiming that it was a cover to provide cover to the hostage operation. So I want to issue. I want to make sure that you guys understand this. I should have said this is the Israeli military's reasoning, claiming that they were killing at least 67 people according to the health ministry, so that they could provide military cover as Shin Bet rescued 2 hostages. Now, the problem is, according to Haaretz, I don't know, chatters, if you have the Haaretz article saying that the 2 hostages were released on the 2nd of February, so that was actually 10 days prior. That would be pretty ridiculous if they were actually rescued 10 days prior and it wasn't a different operation that you guys are confusing with. However, as you all know, there's always a lot of post hoc rationalizations and like post hoc evidence gathering, evidence in air quotes, whenever there's something going on that's specific. Israel always finds, CNN will write a report on 16 cemeteries that are desecrated. And then the next day, the IDF will be like, actually, here's a Hamas headquarters under a cemetery. That's why we had to destroy 16 cemeteries, right? And it's really interesting how that always happens. UNRWA, which has been a burden, a thorn on Benjamin Netanyahu and far right Israeli sides for the crimes of keeping Palestinians alive, hiring 13,000 Palestinians, being like a major lifeline for many Palestinians, because it's not just a UN-backed organization, but one that actually hires Palestinians directly and plays a big role in their civic life, right, with schools and whatnot. This is a organization that Israel has routinely criticized and wanted to abolish, eviscerate, destroy. And then after the ICJ decision, which also, of course, featured testimonials from UNRWA workers and whatnot, Israel very quickly offered what I would, I guess, in the most liberal way possible, describe as misinformation to claim that 12 out of the 13,000 UNRWA employees were actually collaborating. 13. We're actually collaborating with Hamas on October 7th, and therefore this organization needs to be cut. This organization's funding needs to be cut, which, additional investigation found out that like much of that information was also untrue, yet it doesn't fucking matter. And now they found another Hamas headquarters, like a base of operations directly under an UNRWA facility. That's what Israel found recently. So they do this all the time. There's always something that comes right after people criticize whatever specific thing Israel has done.
Yeah. Timing is always this timing is so absurd that you would think the rest of the world would pay notice, right? On the day of an ICJ decision, suddenly this UNRWA dossier gets revealed to the mass public that discredits the United Nations altogether. I mean, it's ridiculous stuff.
Yeah, and so it's it's very harrowing. Another thing that I wanted to cover before we get to the Super Bowl ad that ran, and before like we talk about Joe Biden's like dark branded memes and whatnot, and the reception of it and how tone deaf it is, because simultaneously this like bombing campaign was occurring. That's what he was, the administration was too busy tweeting that out after they like put together a funding package, a separate funding package.
Okay, both just agreeing. It really, yeah. I mean, I keep in mind, like if you're watching this video and only this video, I just watched Mark and Destiny have a long back and forth productive conversation, and now this conversation is just like, it's like Israel sucks. Yeah, I agree. Israel sucks. Yeah, I agree. Right. I'm not interested, like as of right now, I'm not interested in kind of like counter any of the points that they're making. I do think that the invasion, or I don't even know what you want to say, operation in Rafah is very questionable as of right now, and I think it's deservingly so when it comes down to it being questionable, considering Egypt is not happy. Joe Biden said you better have a plan. Like it's not great. So
package for Israel to the tune of what's 14 or 17 billion dollars that they separated from the prior border bill that they were trying to pass, which is also reactionary and right wing in a totally different way. There's also another story. I don't know if you're familiar with this. The story of Hind Rajab, 6 years old, who was also executed. Yeah. And the way that the British media covered the story, I'm actually kind of surprised that this hasn't gotten more coverage overall. But this is a 6-year-old that was, I guess, found dead in Gaza days after phone calls for help. And the way this article utilizes neutrality as a weapon.
Voice.
Yes. Yeah, I've never seen passive voice to this degree. Like I've talked about how the IDF not only ironically trains cops and vice versa, but that like the media, the mainstream press in the Western world basically writes about the IDF as though they are the police. Dealing with the people of color, and they utilize passive voice in an identical way.
Wait, what? He's acting like the IDF is like Hamas. Isn't the IDF just a military force in Israel? What is the IDF? Israel Defense Force. Yeah, the IDF is just a military. What is he talking about?
This is the most maxed out version of said passive voice.
Found dead in Gaza days after phone calls for help. What is Hasan talking about?
Share my screen. It's a voice in an as though they are the police, but that like the media, the mainstream press in the Western world basically writes about the IDF as though they are the police.
The military. What?
Dealing with the people of color, and they utilize passive voice in an identical way. This is the most maxed out version of said passive voice. Here, I'll share my screen with you as well, so you can see what I'm looking at here. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on the story of Hind Rajab real quick?
It's a really disturbing tale for a few reasons. I mean, one obviously is the actual death itself, right? When this young woman was child was killed or died in this car, the only one who survived from an attack is in and of itself problematic. I hear I'm starting to hear right wing Israelis and other people say it was Palestinians who killed the family. I have seen no evidence of that. And we saw this girl. We have audio recordings of this girl actually making phone calls, trying to get help. And one of the challenges in this moment, we saw this with some of the journalists who were killed in the last month. Even when you look like the family of you see like even when people are killed or not killed and they're looking for medical help, there's blockades, there's physical obstruction. It's impossible to get the kind of support that you need. And in this case, she lost her aunt, her uncle, she lost cousins. And once again, when you look at the overall Palestinian child population, tens of thousands of them are now parentless or guardianless because of the amount of people who have been killed.
I mean, that's what happened in
one of the things that we've
war.
all been outraged by the last 24 hours, last 48 hours, of course, has been the way the headlines have been like a little girl found. In fact, here's one right here. I'm looking at what you posted. A 6-year-old girl who went missing in Gaza City last month has been found dead, right?
Along with several of her relatives and 2 paramedics who tried to save her after they appeared to have come under fire from Israeli tanks. And like even in that situation, like
6-year-old girl who went missing in Gaza City last month had been found dead, along with several of her relatives and 2 paramedics who tried to save her. They appear to have come under fire from Israeli teams.
You're burying the lead in the subtitle. I don't know how that's even possible. That like you openly admitted it's
before they would even mention the Israeli tanks. It was like 6-year-old girl found dead in car.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The title is Hind Rajab 6 found dead in Gaza days after phone calls for help. Like as though this was like an earthquake or something.
What are you? I guess they're complaining. Oh, you need to put by Israeli tanks in the title. I guess that's what Hasan's complaining about. Okay. Just read the article. The article has the information. Are we really bitching about a title? Like, oh, Jesus Christ.
Right.
And she made phone calls, and not that like this was a car that was attacked by Israeli tanks, and then the Palestinian Red Crescent made efforts with an ambulance on the evening of January 29th to find Hind Rajab after phone calls that she made because they believe that she was trapped in the vehicle in Gaza City with 6 dead family members, and the A group said that they had been killed by Israeli fire deliberately. And the Red Crescent statement on Saturday also accused the Israeli forces of bombing the ambulance as it arrived just meters away from the vehicle containing the trapped child and killing 2 rescuers inside. It said this happened despite prior coordination between the Red Crescent and the Israeli military. We know that the Israeli military also has snipers trained on people that they wound deliberately and then shoot civilians that try to recover the wounded and try to save the wounded. They openly open fire on civilians that are trying to help out other civilians in any part of Gaza.
That is a fact. And again,
wait, that's such a crazy accusation. Hold on.
Civilians that try to recover the wounded and try to save the wounded. They openly open fire on civilians that are trying to find Hind Rajab after phone calls that she made because they believe that she was trapped in the vehicle in Gaza City with 6 dead family members. And the A group said that they had been killed by Israeli fire deliberately. And the Red Crescent statement on Saturday also accused the Israeli forces of bombing the ambulance as it arrived just meters away from the vehicle containing the trapped child and killing 2 rescuers inside. It said this happened despite prior coordination between the Red Crescent and the Israeli military. We know that the Israeli military also has snipers trained on people that they wound deliberately.
I do want to say that bombing that ambulance is crazy. If the Red Cross said that, and if that's true, it's crazy. I'll let them continue.
And then shoot civilians that try to recover the wounded and try to save the wounded. They openly open fire on civilians that are trying to help out other civilians in any part of Gaza.
I don't know if I believe that. I would believe it more so if it was like they hurt soldiers and wait for other soldiers to help them and then they shoot them both. Like that's just a military tactic. But deliberately shooting civilians to kill more civilians, I don't believe that. The fact that Mark just agreed to that is very disgusting. But I'm going to look it up because that is a crazy accusation. Does Israel, let's look it up. See if I can find. Yeah, I can't find an article proving this. I feel like that's a crazy accusation, and I would need proof. If someone's watching this video and they have proof, I need that proof. Put it in the comment section. I'm gonna read it because I need proof. That's a crazy
That is a fact.
accusation.
And again, these aren't outliers. This is the norm at this point. You know,
She said that is a fact. Was Mark listening? Did you hear what Hassan just said? He said the Israel is shooting civilians to kill more civilians. That's a fact.
help is cut off. Innocent people are being killed in houses, in cars, in shelters, in hospitals. And Amnesty International just today, in fact, talked about the results of several investigations of homes that have been bombed.
I guess he is new to social media. I feel like he actually wasn't paying attention to what Hassan just said, because the fact that you agreed, like social media is so nitpicky and they clip shit so much that I'm gonna give Mark the benefit of the doubt that he didn't hear what Hassan just said. That's what I'm gonna do.
And cars, similarly, that have been
Because I just saw how he
there's no
talked with
legitimate-
Destiny,
they
and
have
he was
no legitimate,
way more
military
nuanced.
operation, no legitimate combatant, no legitimate target to justify this type of violence.
And there rarely ever is. But I'm saying, like, be on the lookout for post-mortem slander for how 6-year-old Palestinian girls are also somehow Hamas.
Yeah, she was part of a Girl Scout troop that was connected to Hamas.
Yeah.
or the car
Some shit like
itself was disguised as Hamas. So, I mean, like at this point, it's so absurd. And part of what they also do, and we saw this in the States, with the civil injunctions against gangs, was they had these initiatives where they would, put people on gang lists and watch lists if you had a gang affiliation or gang connection. But I mean, what does it mean to be connected to a gang if you live in South Central Los Angeles, right? I mean, everybody's 1 degree of separation from somebody, and similar.
I mean, we understand what affiliation. If you think that the affiliation marker is is either too lenient or too aggressive, we can talk about it. But let's not. Let's talk about the details. Let's not talk about
in an area that's dense,
the notion.
where Hamas is a democratically elected ruling body. They control various dimensions of the state.
Yeah.
And they're on the ground. It's damn near impossible to have a job, to be employed, to live somewhere, to be a human being and not be 1 or 2 degrees of separation directly from the people of the state are trying to kill, or that the Israeli state is trying to kill. And so you can make a case that anybody has a Hamas affiliation. Anybody's loosely connected to Hamas. And so when they kill our
That's nasty. Now, if that is what Israel is doing, then they deserve criticism. But that's pretty nasty. That's pretty nasty. You're making that's a crazy accusation, Mark, because you're acquiescing, saying that the Israeli government is basically saying anybody that is close to Hamas in terms of proximity is affiliated, and that is disgusting. That is pretty nasty.
our journalists, they can say, oh, well, they were part of Hamas, and you find out they just worked at the radio station.
Yeah.
And so similarly, they'll say, well, that car got hit. The girl, at best, they'll say, well, Hind was, we didn't want to hit the 6-year-old girl, but everybody else in that car could get it. And because they had Hamas connections. And that becomes the pretext for all sorts of indiscriminate violence.
Yeah, it's completely unacceptable. It's ethnic cleansing through and through. And it is a damn shame that the Western world, the Western leadership, specifically the United States of America, is not only not doing anything about this, but also offering full support, full-throated support, as a matter of fact, like cutting off UNRWA funding when America is the largest funder of UNRWA. A day after the ICJ court decision was, in my opinion, a very deliberate, very straightforward statement that they were making about how we do not give a fuck about the international rule-based order unless we are the ones who are writing the rules and we are the ones making the orders, which is something that I truly do think America believes. It's just such a clear demonstration of that reality. However, so yeah, this is pretty awful. But like I said also earlier, here it is. As far as the bombing campaign in Rafah, the IDF should have been working, according to Barak Ravid. The IDF should have been working on the rescue operation for several weeks based on intelligence. The operational opportunity came today. The Israeli Air Force conducted heavy airstrikes in Rafah as a diversion to allow the extraction of the 2 hostages, which, once again, ridiculous to claim that, like, in order to...
Let me rewind.
As far as the bombing campaign in Rafah, the IDF should have been working, according to Barak Ravid, the IDF should have been working on the rescue operation for several weeks based on intelligence. The operational opportunity came today. The Israeli Air Force conducted heavy airstrikes in Rafah as a diversion to allow the extraction of the 2 hostages, which, once again, ridiculous to claim that, like...
If they did the airstrikes just as a diversion, especially knowing that there are civilians in the area, that's not excusable. Like that really is not an excusable action. Like I've already said this. In terms of what Netanyahu's doing in Rafah, is questionable. And the fact that he denied the ceasefire plan deal with Hamas is also questionable, because he said that they were demanding too much. Yeah, I would have to get more details on what that means exactly, to be honest.
In order to save quote unquote 2 hostages, you had to kill 60 people, like 60 civilian Palestinians, men, women, children, elderly, specifically to do that. And it's gross. I don't think it even works, but I don't think they even care at this point because nobody
No.
gives a shit. It's seemingly like the people that care obviously are protesting, but those in positions of power do not care. And
October 7th, and they never cared, but October 7th destroys the pretext, right? So now you can just say what happened to us was so awful that anything that happens in retaliation is appropriate. I mean, I've been told that effectively by Israeli government leaders and representatives and former leaders. They say, well, why are you asking me about roof knocking? Why are you asking me about humanitarian corridors? Why are you asking me about hospitals? Did you see what they did to us on October 7th? And because they're advancing the narrative of Palestinian brutality and barbarity, then the world community goes, oh well, you did that. We can't get mad if anything happens to you. And I would argue, and international law certainly supports the idea that even if the worst things imaginable happened, you still have to follow the law. You still have to follow the rules of war. You still have to follow the conventions. But we also know that many of the things that Israel claimed that has happened have also not been substantiated. So it's on multiple levels troublesome.
Yeah. So let's get to the Super Bowl. So this last bombing campaign happened during the Super Bowl. I think some people are saying like, oh, they did it during the Super Bowl deliberately. I don't think so. I think it's just consistent. They've been doing it all the time. They've been doing it nonstop. I don't think they timed it against the Super Bowl, even though yes, the Israeli government absolutely does care about like Western.
Israel's military said early Monday that they had conducted a wave of attacks on Rafah. Oh, I thought this was something different.
Eyeballs on the situation, and like the those in positions of power in the West, at least, like they want full-throated support from. So they care about like massaging the narrative to a certain degree, even though they do a horrifyingly bad job at it. What do I mean by this? Well, I think it's because they're callous, they're careless, and they're very comfortable with that full-throated support that they've gotten to this position where they've completely dropped the pretext of even like liberal Zionism that tries to cleverly manufacture consent, and they're just straight up doing whatever the fuck they can and demanding to the world follow through. And one of the examples of this, and I think this is really interesting, is the fact that obviously Israel gets a shit ton of funding from the United States of America to the tune of almost $10 million a day.
This guy's just agreeing to everything.
Barack Obama on his way out signed a $38 billion 10-year security package for Israel. They get a lot of funding from the UK as well, but specifically there's a lot of funding that comes from for the military side in Israel, but then there's also a lot of defense. So what does Israel do with all that funding other than killing Palestinian children? Well, some of the funds at least goes back to the Israeli ministry.
He's about to say something dumb as shit, bro. He's about to say something dumb as hell, bro.
Making an ad for the fucking Super Bowl and buying a Super Bowl ad slot so they can recycle the narratives that like, no, they need the funding and they need the support over and over again as they are personally killing civilians, killing babies, killing children in Gaza.
I'm so disappointed in Mark, bro. He had this great conversation with Destiny, and now he's just agreeing to everything Hasan is saying. He's just feeding into the rhetoric, right? Even though he knows there's more nuance to it, the fact that he's just like co-signing everything Hasan says is disappointing. And for me, when it comes down to it, I was watching the Super Bowl. I didn't even notice this ad. To be honest, I didn't see this ad. But using a partial amount of your funds to garner more support is not. Why is that a bad thing? You don't even have to agree to what is going on. But why is using some of your funds to garner more support a bad thing? Right? So this whole rhetoric is just being biased. Obviously, it's just being biased because they don't like that it exists. Because ultimately, if you really think it through, I mean, using part of your funds to get more funds is just a common strategy all the time, right? It's like it's kind of mind-blowing that people are going down this rhetoric. Oh, we're sending them this so much money. Look at what they're doing with our money. Like, people know that's not how this stuff works, right? And it's kind of disgusting that they kind of think like this. I'm gonna be right back. I'm gonna have to cut this out when I edit, but I gotta get my food.
Yeah. With our weapons, with our funding. So let's watch this ad real quick. This is the ad that ran during the Super Bowl.
I haven't seen it, so I guess I'm gonna watch it.
God, the quality's 480p. Damn, not getting enough bang for a buck here. Okay, it's called "Bring All of the Dads Back Home."
To all the dads, the funny ones, the silly ones, the strong ones, the adventurous ones. To all the dads held in captivity by Hamas for over 120 days, we vow to bring you home.
sponsored by the state of Israel, hashtag bring all dads back home. This was the state of Israel ad that ran. Now, I've been saying this since fucking day one, and it's incredibly frustrating to see this ad because it's like the Benjamin Netanyahu war cabinet does not give a fuck about the hostages, okay? Beyond using the Israeli prisoners of war and the hostages.
Mark, if you agree to this, I swear to God, I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt. No, I'm gonna relax because I actually like him, and I'm still gonna invite him to my podcast to see if he can come on. If he doesn't, I mean, he just doesn't. Obviously, you know what I'm saying. I'm not gonna be mad, but do not agree to this rhetoric because Hasan just said Netanyahu doesn't care about hostages. Please just don't agree to this sentiment. Please don't agree to this because even if you want to argue, that his actions or even if you want to argue that you don't believe he agrees, just kind of points out that there's no evidence to prove either way at the very least. Like, provide more like nuance. Like you did so much nuance and so much like back and forth productive conversation. You even said that you appreciate when this type of content allows you to flesh out ideas. Do not agree to Hassan's blanket statement that Netanyahu just doesn't care about the hostages. Please don't do that. And I'm not a Netanyahu supporter, but you can't really make that claim. The only way you can make that claim is if you're biased towards Palestine.
As a talking point to continue justifying their ethnic cleansing campaign. They don't give a shit. They so don't give a shit.
Mark, please
Most of the
don't
opposition
disagree to
in
it.
Israel to the
Don't
IDF's
disagree
actions,
to it.
right, come from the hostage family
Don't
members
disagree
who have
to
been
it. Come
demanding
on.
a ceasefire for months now, and the protests are growing and growing and growing. As a matter of fact, in Israel now, obviously that's still there's still plenty more public support, overwhelming public support in continuously pummeling Gaza, specifically from all the polls that come out of the Israeli Palestinian citizens of Israel population versus the Jewish population of Israel. The Jewish population of Israel, according to their own demographics, of course, have simultaneously had overwhelming support for the bombing campaigns and have demanded more to the tune of like 95% or something in recent polling. So beyond that, though, there are still thousands of people that are protesting, and these guys are out here talking about bring all the dads back home. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I think you've captured it pretty accurately for the most part. I might disagree with whether or not they care about the hostages. I think there's a way that they actually.
Thank you. Oh my God, I was gonna be like, bro, Mark, come on now. You can't like. I get it. You're new to the social media space. I get it. Hassan's a big content creator. I know you don't want to burn bridges, but you can't just agree to everything this guy says, man. I'm so glad because I was gonna end the video. I was like, Mark, you just completely disappointed me. But okay, at the very least, you disagreed when like Hasan just said something freaking crazy. Just oh my goodness, keep on going.
Genuinely do care about the hostages, because I think that unlike Palestinians, they see them as people. And I think that there is a fundamental kind of humanity that they can recognize in their own country, men and women, that they can't see in other people's. So I think that's a kind of problem that lots of nation states have in these types of matters. But I agree with your larger point that this campaign is less about the hostages and more about normalizing a certain kind of understanding and disposition toward the Israeli state as it continues to prosecute this war in Gaza. And so, you know, as we watch it happening and we see people bring the dads back, and it's in the middle of the Super Bowl, you now have the mainstream American public. I didn't watch the Super Bowl, but you know, almost every American is watching the Super Bowl, and
You don't watch the Super Bowl?
they're now accepting
Mark,
this narrative as
you didn't watch the Chiefs beat on them San Francisco 49ers? Mark, you didn't watch Goat Mahomes get the game-winning drive? Come on, Mark. Come on, buddy.
normative one. There's not going to be a counter narrative offered. There's not going to be, in the same way that the ICJ decision, most of Western media didn't show South Africa making its case. They only showed the Israeli government responding.
That was
to the
so
narrative.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we're constantly getting fed a single narrative, a diet of a single narrative. And so that's very, very dangerous, very, very troublesome. So when we see that, and a bombing is happening at the same time, effect more or less, the timing is questionable. I think you're right. So many bombings happen, so many strikes happen, so much shelling happen, so many sieges happen that, I mean, I could equally say they did it during the rerun of Friends. Oh, they did it during the Action News, local news. Oh, they did it during morning TV. Oh, there's always something happening. And so I think you're right. I don't necessarily think that they timed it with the Super Bowl, but the fact that it happened during the Super Bowl and the only information we got access to by the mainstream corporate media.
Oh, did this ad not even happen on the Super Bowl? Let me look this freaking thing up. Israel ad in Super Bowl, because I didn't see this ad in the Super Bowl. Okay, let me see. Pro-Israel Super Bowl and Hulu ads labeled propaganda by some ads funded by the Israeli state, blah, blah, blah. But some PR media argue that these aren't regular political ads. saw more than blah blah. They also consume blah 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 blah. But some people blah blah. So it was a commercial. I didn't see this ad, bro. So it did happen during. Okay. The Foundation of Combat Anti-Semitism, a nonprofit organization created by New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft, aired a 30-second spot during the game as part of its ongoing Stand Up to Jewish Hate campaign, which debuted in 2022. The emotional 30-second ad features Clarence B. Jones, a lawyer. Okay, blah, blah, blah. So Robert Kraft is doing politically, and what he'll be using the Super Bowl as a platform to do is dangerous. Of course, someone says that. Oh, so Robert Kraft created it. Okay. All right, let's keep moving.
Was that Israel really wants to bring dads home is really dangerous, and because the pretext of Rafah is that it's a hostage saving mission. It only reinforces that in a very subtle way, right? They're not saying, "Hey, we're in Rafah right now kicking ass to save dads," but you can connect your own dots in the same way that on the day that the ICJ made announced its emergency provisions, emergency measures, Israel didn't say, "Don't listen to them. They hate us." They just at the same time, on the same day, issued a report that UNRWA and other UN organizations are corrupt and responsible for October 7th. At the same time that their highest court is making a ruling. So again, the dots are the pieces are there. You connect your own dots. And American politicians and American government representatives are more than happy to connect the dots for us as well. As they stop UNRWA funding, as they will say, "Hey, what's happening in Rafah isn't great." But we still support Israel's right to defend it. So still keeping in place the framework, even if we're finally willing to push back just a tiny bit and say, okay, that might be just a little too much. 28,000 people dead is just too much.
Yeah. So that was one aspect that I wanted to talk about. The other aspect was also Joe Biden's tone deaf tweet talking about how, just like we drew it up, Joe Biden's team obviously making jokes about how the Democratic Party is actually responsible for the Super Bowl being rigged so that they can help so that Taylor Swift can go on the field and kiss.
Wait, what? Wait, what bullshit is the song saying now? How much is this? 20 more minutes? Insane country where its leaders posting this while a military his administration is armed to the teeth is bombing 1 million Palestinians. Okay.
I wanted to talk about the other aspect was also Joe Biden's tone deaf tweet talking about how, just like we drew it up, Joe Biden's team obviously making jokes about how the Democratic Party is actually responsible for the Super Bowl being rigged so that they can help so that Taylor Swift can go on the field and kiss Travis Kelce, who's a liberal, and then they can say vote for Joe Biden or whatever. I don't know what kind of right wing mania will come out of this. I mean, I'm excited to see. I'm a little worried. I assume there will be at least a couple people that end up, if things go as they have so far, at least a couple more right-wing QAnon guys are going to go and do YouTube live streams of their patricide decapitations or whatever, as the media conveniently ignores that and rarely discusses it, so they can yell about, I don't know, a couple migrants in New York that got beat up by cops or whatever. But I wanted to hear your perspective on this. What do you think? What do you think will happen, I guess, in the American election, considering how Biden has been received so far by even the Democratic Party? And how he has treated the situation in Gaza.
I mean, it is what it is.
I think Biden is holding tight to the strategy that, hey, being lockstep with Israel has never failed an American president running for office, right? Like you don't lose an election because of your stance on Israel, because of your fidelity to Israel, right? Yeah. So he's taking that posture. But I think with every campaign, whether it's cast-led, whether it's protective edge, as the campaigns continue, the access we have to what's happening on the ground continues to expand, and as a result, more and more people are frustrated. And so you now see young voters who aren't going to support this. You see progressive and radical voters who aren't going to support this. Are they going to vote Trump? Probably not. Although, an argument could be made by some people that at least he was not an interventionist in a certain kind of way. I think what you're going to see is a lot of people who just stay home. You're going to see a lot of people who vote third party. You're going to see a lot of people who are just dissatisfied. And then, if you look at even in Michigan, where, he was going to Dearborn and Ann Arbor and other places, and the Arabs were like, yo, no. There's nothing you could tell us to make us vote for you. There's absolutely nothing you could offer us that makes sense. And so don't even show up. Right. I think there'll be a lot of people who may not have that explicit claim or that explicit warning to the president, but their voting patterns will be the same. And so I think Palestine, I think Gaza in particular, is going to be an issue that severely impairs Joe Biden's ability to successfully run for president.
Yeah, interesting. I guess my opinion on it is that
give me 5 seconds. I just gotta let somebody in my door. I just realized.
Okay. That's fine. Yeah, go ahead.
I can hear you still.
Well, yeah, no, it's fine. I'm gonna be talking anyway to my chat, but What I've said over and over again, I think, is that it's not even just that Biden isn't like sufficiently pro-Israel or sufficiently anti-Israel, but rather Biden's wishy-washy approach to Israel is on the one hand he talks about how like Israel needs to cut it out, Jack, but also simultaneously offering massive weapons packages and behind closed doors seemingly offering no red lines, even though he claims that he's trying to get Israel to make concessions. In my opinion, shows a lack of having a clear-cut direction on the issue of Israel, which then makes him look weak. What do I mean by this? I mean there has been polling done on the matter. Trump currently leads Biden by 10 points on the issue of Israel. Why? How is that even possible? Well, that's because, in my opinion, that when I look at those numbers, it's partially one because Trump is currently not president, right? So there's
That's actually true. Trump leads by 10 points. What has Trump really said about Palestine and Israel? Has he said anything? I think he hasn't said a single thing about Palestine and Israel. I don't think he said a single thing. And let's remember that Trump also made Jerusalem the capital of Israel. So
always a big benefit to that. And two, the second reason why I think Trump is leading Biden by 10 points on Israel is because Trump is consistent, at least, on the issue of Israel, whereas Biden shows inconsistency by claiming that he wants peace, claiming that he wants a two-state solution, as Benjamin Netanyahu routinely undermines him. So I think it plays into Biden being too old and asleep at the wheel, and the narrative that his biggest weakness, basically, is that narrative. I think the way he's handled this issue plays into that as well. Not to say that like voters are single-issue voters on Israel-Palestine. I mean, maybe in Michigan, but some in Michigan. But overall, like, it's not. Americans don't give a shit at all.
Right. That's 100% true. That's 100% factual. And the thing about Biden is, yeah, he's asleep at the wheel, and I'm sure lots of things are getting past him. But he, more than maybe any U.S. president that I've seen in my lifetime, because Reagan didn't give a shit about this. Reagan was trying to punt on Israel every chance he got. George H.W. Bush, probably one of the stronger people in Israel. Obama, wasn't exactly profiling courage, but he at least was willing to to punt a little bit. He was willing to abstain from UN votes and such. But Joe Biden's like, I'm a Zionist.
Oh yeah.
He's an unabashed guy. Yeah.
Have you heard the reports? Like, I think it was like in the 90s or something. Like after the beginning of the Lebanese invasion, where he was like, yeah, no, I would do even more. I would be even more genocidal. Like he was to the right of Israel at a certain point on these issues, which is like.
I would have to kind of hear what he said. When did he say it? Hasan is just having some of the weirdest facts.
Crazy.
It's wild. I didn't know that was possible, but he absolutely was. And so when you have that kind of position on the matter, it takes a lot. It takes a lot for him to be willing to restrain. The U.S.'s position basically since after the Suez crisis. I mean, really, that's probably the last moment of major U.S. resistance to Israel was 1956. Since then, the U.S. has only grown increasingly lockstep with Israel in all things. And the tactic and the strategy is now is to not show any disagreement. There's not an inch of daylight to their shoulder to shoulder, all the stupid metaphors. Yeah. And so, Biden already has that against him. But you'd hope that behind the scenes he'd be pressuring them. And from what I hear, there has been some behind the scenes pressure for a ceasefire, but the U.S. has no leverage. The U.S. has literally no leverage. And while he certainly wants to court left-wing voters, and he certainly wants the young college students to say, hey, we're on board with you, he's far more concerned with looking weak on this issue. He's far more concerned with Trump being able to move him, because if Trump moves him on this issue, you run the risk of Jewish American voters who overwhelmingly vote Democrat saying, look, times have changed. This is an extreme exception to our rule, but we're going to go Trump. That's another worry that Biden has. Or just that the general centrist voter who sees this issue as a sign of a bigger unrest in the Middle East, and they're worried about Iran, and they're worried about this, and they're worried about that. And they're going to say, you know what, we're sorry, we have to go elsewhere for our vote. I think Biden's more concerned with that than losing the extreme left wing or than a 19-year-old college student vote. And so Biden's in a tough spot here as somebody whose primary interest is in controlling the empire as opposed to making the world better. And I think that's why you're seeing such a weird kind of calculation here where they're starting to whisper. I mean, Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense, has always kind of said, to Israel, hey, like, if your goal is to get rid of Hamas, this ain't the way. I think Anthony Blinken has become increasingly vocal as well.
All right, I'm kind of bored of this. I'm gonna be honest. Shout out Mark. He disagreed at least once, so that's a thing. But overall, it's kind of just a kind of circle jerk. What is the hustle
of this interview? But I wanted to also go through the news as well.
I love the exchange, but let's do it again real soon, like in the next week or two. But I would love to do it.
Hell yeah! All right, well, thank you so much.
Man, seems like Mark is gonna go through a song and get a bunch of go through a song to increase his notoriety, and it is gonna be in the leftist kind of social echo chamber. Unfortunately, that's unfortunate because he was like, "Let's do this real soon in like the next week or two" to Hasan, and then him and Destiny, obviously. It's so unfortunate, because he's very educated, but you know, I can at the very least say his heart's in the right place. Maybe once he sees more of like how Hassan is, he will realize that Hassan's not the best person to consistently like interact with in terms of political discourse because of the stuff he says. But maybe Mark is secretly just like that, where he thinks America is completely racist. He thinks he thinks communism is better than capitalism. Maybe Mark thinks that because I don't know, man. I don't know. Will I ask him to come on my podcast at some point? Yes. I want to have, when it comes to my podcast, I don't care where you come from. I want to have you on and have a conversation. So nothing about you unless you're like freaking, man, I might even invite a scumbag on my podcast, depending on like the conversation. Like if it's warranted to hear their mindset, that might be like appropriate. But yeah, that's all we got for today. That is another video. Do I have enough time to do another? Well, let me go through the comment section. But that's all we got. Hope you guys enjoyed. Rate it, not rate it 5 stars, but like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Let's try to get to 500 subscribers. If I haven't already, let's aim for 1,000. Let's get monetized. Hope you guys enjoyed. Y'all have a good one. Take care and peace.